Dad, don't sign page 17. Ava Whitaker's small hand clamped around her father's wrist just as the black pen touched the signature line. Daniel froze in the glass-walled HR room, his navy work jacket stained with machine oil, while Martin Kessler slid the contract closer and Victor Haynes watched from behind him. At the far end of the table, Evelyn Mercer looked up from her tablet. Page 17 lay open under a yellow sticker, clean in the corner where Ava's little star should have been. "Children get confused," Martin said softly. "That's not Daddy's page," Ava whispered, and somehow the room grew colder. 3 hours earlier, the factory still smelled of hot metal, floor wax, and burned coffee. Whitestone components had not fully awakened yet, but the fluorescent lights were already humming above the administrative hallway, making everything look pale and tired. Daniel Whitaker stood near the security desk with Ava's backpack looped over one shoulder and his metal lunchbox in his left hand. He had come straight from the end of his night shift, face unshaven, eyes red from too little sleep, but he still bent down to zip Ava's coat before the receptionist could see her shivering. "You okay, Peanut?" he asked. Ava nodded, though her fingers stayed tucked inside his sleeve. She did not like this building. Not the polished floor. Not the frosted glass doors. Not the way adults lowered their voices when they saw her father coming. Daniel had been told it would be a simple meeting, just a review of the incident on line 4, just a few signatures so the company could move forward. That was the phrase Carl Rourke had used on the phone, friendly enough to sound rehearsed. Move forward. Daniel had heard men say that before when they meant bury it. He did not answer with anger. He only asked if Ava could sit nearby because her school nurse had called early and Mrs. Henderson could not come until noon. Carl had sighed like a child was a scheduling problem. "Fine," he said, "but keep her quiet." Daniel had looked at him then, not sharply, not with pride, but with the steady calm of a man who had swallowed harder things than insult. "She is quiet," he said. "That's never been the problem." Now, as they were led into the HR room, Daniel noticed small things the way he always did. The camera in the upper corner had a tiny red light. The conference table had been wiped recently, but one edge still held a crescent of dried coffee. The contract stack was too neat, squared perfectly as if no human hand had carried it home, read it tired at a kitchen table, and set it beside a child's crayons. Evelyn Mercer sat at the far end, dark blazer, silver watch, tablet angled toward her. She did not smile. Martin Kessler smiled enough for everyone. Victor Haynes stood by the blinds with his hands folded, his voice warm as Sunday charity. "Daniel, we want to protect your family," he said. Daniel pulled out the chair for Ava first, then sat. Martin opened the folder and turned directly to page 17. Too directly. The page made a soft whisper against the table, and Daniel felt something in him slow down. The yellow sticker was there. The signature line was there. But the bottom corner was empty, and Ava was already staring at it like she had found a missing tooth in someone else's smile. The empty corner of page 17 held Ava's eyes like a tiny open grave. Daniel saw it too, but before he could reach for the paper, Martin Kessler placed 2 fingers on the edge of the contract and drew it back half an inch, just enough to remind everyone whose table it was. "Let's not turn this into theater. She's 8, Victor Haynes added, almost kindly. "And she's scared." Carl Rourke gave a small breath through his nose, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh, the kind of sound men make when they want a child to feel like a mistake in the room. Ava's shoulders tightened under Daniel's oil-stained jacket. The fluorescent lights buzzed above them, thin and mean, and the glass walls reflected Daniel back at himself. Tired eyes, rough hands, work boots with dried gray dust in the seams. A man who had spent the night keeping machines alive and was now being treated like one that could be replaced. He reached over and pulled Ava's chair closer to his knee. "She didn't say she understood the document," Daniel said quietly. "She said it wasn't the same page." Martin smiled as if Daniel had just confirmed something disappointing. "Mr. Whitaker, this is precisely why we prefer these meetings to remain between adults." He opened a cream-colored envelope and slid it onto the table. The words "Insurance Continuation Review" were printed across the front in clean corporate blue. Ava sounded out the first word under her breath, then stopped when Daniel's hand covered the envelope. Victor leaned forward, his cufflinks catching the light. Daniel, nobody here wants to make your life harder. You are a single father. We understand that. We also understand your daughter depends on the company plan. Don't. Daniel's voice did not rise. Don't use her insurance to make me lie. For the first time, Evelyn Mercer's pen stopped moving. She did not look sympathetic. Sympathy would have been easier, cheaper. Instead, she studied Daniel's face as if she were checking whether his calm was honesty or performance. Carl shifted near the door, his radio crackling once at his shoulder, and said, "All this over a page when we have a damaged line, a downed valve, and a night engineer who panicked at 2:13. The room went still in a different way. Not silent. Listening. Daniel's eyes moved from Carl to the report lying beside the contract. There, under incident time, the printed line read 2:26 a.m. in black ink. Evelyn saw Daniel notice it. Martin saw Evelyn notice Daniel. Victor, still smiling, folded his hands on the back of the chair in front of him. Carl means the general window of the event. No, Daniel said, so softly Ava had to lean toward him to hear. He said 2:13. Martin shut the folder a little too quickly. The paper made a flat slap against the polished table. Mr. Whitaker, we are not here to litigate stray recollections. We are here to resolve a personnel matter before it becomes a legal one. He tapped page 17, right above the yellow sticker. The cleanest path is cooperation. Daniel looked at the yellow sticker, the blank corner, the cream envelope under his palm. He did not grab the paper. He did not accuse anyone. He only turned Ava's backpack upright where it had fallen against the table leg, zipped the open pocket, and tucked one loose. Crayon back inside. It was a tiny act, almost nothing, but it made Evelyn look again. A man being cornered was still making sure his daughter did not lose her things. I want the service log from last night, Daniel said. Victor's warmth thinned by a degree. Daniel, the line 4 log. That entry was reviewed. Evelyn finally moved. She touched her tablet, entered her executive access, and the room filled with the faint clicking of glass under her fingernail. The screen loaded, blinked, then displayed one gray line. Entry deleted by supervisor override. Daniel stared at it, and in the reflection of the tablet, he saw Carl's jaw tighten before anyone else spoke. The gray words on Evelyn Mercer's tablet stayed there like a quiet accusation. Entry deleted by supervisor override. Daniel did not lean forward triumphantly. He did not point at Carl. He only looked at the screen for a long second, then down at Ava's small fingers curled around the sleeve of his oil-stained jacket. There was an entry, he said. Martin Kessler gave a practiced sigh. Or there was a system correction. Those happen. Carl Rourke's jaw flexed once, hard enough for the muscle near his ear to jump. Evelyn noticed it but said nothing yet. Her tablet light reflected in the polished table, pale blue across page 17, across the blank corner where Ava's star should have been. Tell me what you wrote, Evelyn said. Daniel's eyes shifted, not to her, but past the glass wall toward the factory floor where line 4 sat beyond 2 corridors and a locked safety door. 3 hours earlier, before lawyers and envelopes and clean pages, there had only been the sound. A thin metallic whine under the normal thunder of the night shift. Most men would have missed it. The line was loud enough to swallow thought. Belts clicking, motors breathing heat, fans pushing the smell of coolant and scorched dust through the air. Daniel had been walking toward the locker room with his lunchbox in one hand, already late to pick up Ava from the security office where she sometimes waited after early school calls. Then the whine bent upward, just half a note too sharp, like a kettle about to scream. Daniel stopped. Mason, the new kid on the floor, laughed nervously and said, "Old machines always sing, right?" Daniel set his lunchbox down. Not like that. He crossed to the pressure panel and watched the needle twitch. Not swing. Twitch. Small, fast, wrong. A gasket under heat stress could lie for a while, but a machine had its own kind of conscience. It told the truth before people did. Daniel opened the breaker cabinet, pulled the line down, and clipped the red tag through the lockout hasp. Lockout, do not run. His handwriting was plain, blocky, the kind Ava teased him for because all his letters looked like little fences. Carl's voice came over the radio 10 seconds later, irritated and sharp. Whitaker, why is 4 down? Daniel pressed the button. Pressure irregularity. Possible heat seal failure. I'm logging it. We have targets. Then we'll miss them alive. There was silence on the radio. Daniel did not smile. He wrote the warning by hand in the service log because the terminal was freezing between screens. Time, 2:05 a.m. Symptoms. High-pitch whine, needle flutter, suspected substandard heat seal gasket. Then he saw Mason and 2 other workers still near the rail, waiting for permission to clear a jam. Daniel walked over and stepped between them and the machine. Back up. Mason looked embarrassed. Carl said we can check the belt. Not until safety clears it. Man, I need this shift. Daniel softened then, just a little. He knew that fear. Rent fear. Grocery fear. The kind that made good people step where they shouldn't. He took his untouched wrapped sandwich from his lunchbox and pushed it into Mason's hand. Eat this in the break room. Tell them I sent you. It was nothing. Turkey on white bread, a bruised apple, a father's dinner he had planned to eat in the parking lot, while Ava slept in the passenger seat. But Mason's hand had been shaking, and Daniel had seen too many shaking hands become names on incident reports. Under the lower panel, something silver rolled near Daniel's boot. He bent, picked up a small screw with a half-mauled serial number, rubbed it clean with his thumb, and felt his stomach tighten. It did not match the hardware they were supposed to use. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, not as evidence yet, just as a question he could not ignore. Now, in the HR room, Daniel reached into that same pocket and placed the tiny screw on the table beside the cream insurance envelope. It made almost no sound. Carl looked at it too quickly. Ava's eyes followed his movement, then drifted to the edge of his coat, where a broken piece of red plastic peeked from the pocket like a small wound. Evelyn saw Daniel notice the screw, saw Ava notice Carl, and for the first time, the deleted entry did not look like missing paperwork. It looked like the first place someone had tried to bury a good deed. The tiny screw sat beside the insurance envelope like something too small to carry a man's innocence. And that was exactly why Martin Kessler reached for it with such polite impatience. A loose fastener proves nothing, he said. Factories shed parts. People pocket things. Memories become convenient under pressure. Daniel did not pull the screw away. He only turned it with one finger until the rub-down serial caught the overhead light. Carl Rourke shifted near the door, and the broken red plastic in his coat pocket disappeared as he folded his arms. Ava saw it vanish. She did not say anything yet. She pressed her lips together the way children do when they know speaking will make adults look at them. Evelyn Mercer watched the room instead of the screw. That was her habit, Daniel realized. She did not look for tears. She looked for timing. Martin was too smooth. Victor was too warm. Carl was too still. Mr. Whitaker, Evelyn said, her voice controlled. You understand why this looks complicated. You handled equipment after an incident, removed a part from the floor, and now the log you claim to have written is gone. I understand, Daniel said. That doesn't make the missing things less missing. Victor gave a sympathetic nod, almost sorrowful. Daniel, no one is calling you a bad father. No one is saying you intended harm. But panic makes good people do strange things. Ava's fingers tightened around the hem of Daniel's jacket. The word father had landed wrong in the room, like it was being used as a leash. Daniel felt it, but he did not take the bait. He looked down at page 17 again. The paper was bright, clean, corporate white. No star, no coffee mark, no tiny crease from where Ava had leaned her elbow beside it at the kitchen table. He remembered the night before. Ava in pajamas with clouds on them, crayons scattered near his cold mug, the apartment heater ticking behind the wall, the contract spread between unpaid bills and her spelling worksheet. She had drawn the star in purple because she said black ink looked sad. Daniel looked up. I need to call Mrs. Henderson. Martin blinked once. Your neighbor. She has Ava after school sometimes. The copy I brought home may still be on my kitchen table. That would not be an official record, Martin said quickly. Too quickly. Evelyn's eyes moved to him. He did not say it was official. I'm saying it could be altered. By whom? Daniel asked softly. Martin's smile thinned. By anyone with access to it. Then let's see it before we decide what it is. The air conditioner clicked on, blowing cold air across the table. Ava leaned toward Daniel and whispered, Mrs. Henderson uses the old phone. It takes blurry pictures. Blurry is fine, Daniel said. Truth doesn't always arrive in high definition. Evelyn did not smile, but her pen paused again. She gave one small nod. Daniel called on speaker. The ringtone sounded too loud in the glass room, thin and old-fashioned. Mrs. Henderson answered breathless, with the television murmuring in the background and a dog barking somewhere close. Daniel asked her to look on the kitchen table beside the blue crayon box. There was a rustle, a cabinet closing. Then her voice came back. Honey, there's a stack of papers here with Ava's little star on one page. Ava looked up. Purple, purple, Mrs. Henderson said. And there's a coffee stain. You really ought to use coasters, Daniel. No one laughed. A minute later, Evelyn's tablet chimed. The photo was crooked, yellowed by the old phone's weak camera, but clear enough. Page 17. Purple star in the bottom corner. Brown crescent of coffee beside the staple shadow. And beneath the paragraph missing from the HR version, 3 words Daniel. Had not forgotten. Substandard heat seal gasket. Martin leaned forward. That copy should have been collected. The room stopped with him. Victor's eyes flicked sideways. Carl looked at the floor. Evelyn slowly turned the tablet so the photo faced the page 17 on the table. One page with a child star and one page scrubbed clean, and asked the question no one in the room wanted answered. Collected by whom, Mr. Kessler? Collected by whom, Mr. Kessler? Evelyn's question did not land loudly, but it changed the shape of the room. Martin's hand hovered above the table, too close to page 17, then withdrew as if the paper had become hot. Victor Haynes gave a soft, controlled chuckle. Let's not overinterpret a poor choice of words. Then we won't, Evelyn said. We'll test what we can test. She turned her tablet toward the door and sent a message with 2 taps. Carl shifted again, and the radio on his shoulder gave a burst of static that made Ava flinch. Daniel reached down without looking and covered her hand with his, thumb resting over her knuckles, steady as a brace. No one is in trouble for remembering, he whispered. Ava nodded, still staring at the purple star glowing from Mrs. Henderson's crooked photo. 5 minutes later, a safety engineer named Paul Brenner stepped into the HR room carrying a portable scanner, a caliper, and the tired expression of a man pulled out of a morning inspection. He glanced first at Victor, then at Evelyn, and only after that at Daniel because power had a gravity of its own. Martin folded his arms. For the record, we are indulging an unverified theory based on a child's drawing and a loose screw. Daniel did not answer him. He took the cream insurance envelope from under his palm, turned it over to the blank side, and drew with the black pen he had refused to sign with. Not fancy, not dramatic, just a pressure line, a heat seal housing, a gasket seat, and one small arrow where stress would build before a valve cracked. The pen scratched softly across the paper. The air conditioner clicked and hummed. Even Victor stopped moving for a second. If this gasket is rated correctly, Daniel said, the pressure needle sways under. Load, but it doesn't twitch. Last night it twitched. Fast. Like a pulse. Paul leaned closer despite himself. You saw that. I heard it first. Carl gave a dry laugh. Now the machine talked to him. Daniel looked up, calm enough to make the insult feel smaller than the truth. Machines talk all night. Most people only listen after someone gets hurt. The room went quiet. Not because they believed him fully, not yet, but because he had not said it like a man defending pride. He said it like a father imagining a phone call no family should receive at 3 in the morning. Evelyn slid the tiny screw toward Paul with the edge of a folder. Scan it. Paul ran the handheld scanner over the half-mulled cereal. The first pass failed. The second caught 3 remaining digits and a manufacturer prefix. He frowned, typed into his tablet, and the screen reflected in his glasses. This prefix isn't on Whitestone's approved Line 4 hardware list. Victor stepped in smoothly. Emergency substitutes happen. Supply chain has been a nightmare since last quarter. You knew it was a gasket substitute? Evelyn asked. Victor paused. It was less than a second, but Daniel saw it. Martin spoke before Victor could. He is speaking generally. Daniel placed his hand flat on the table, not near the contract, not near the screw, just between Ava and the adults deciding his life. Don't believe me, he said. Believe the machine before it hurts somebody. Evelyn looked at him differently then, not with softness, but with a kind of reluctant respect. She touched her tablet and issued a temporary safety pause on line 4. Victor's smile thinned. We have an investor tour in 90 minutes. Then they can tour a factory that prefers live workers, Evelyn said. She asked Paul to pull the cached maintenance records. Martin objected politely. Victor suggested they do it privately. Carl said nothing at all. The cache loaded slowly, each spinning icon tightening the room another notch, until a deleted line appeared under the system history. Daniel Whitaker, 2:05 a.m., pressure irregularity logged. Ava exhaled like she had been holding the whole factory in her chest. Daniel only lowered his eyes for a moment, then nodded once, as if the truth deserved dignity too. But Paul kept scrolling, and the next entry made his hand stop on the tablet. Line 4 had been restarted 8 minutes later, at 2:13 a.m., from Carl Rourke's supervisor account. Line 4 had been restarted at 2:13 a.m. from Carl Rourke's supervisor account, and for the first time, Carl looked less like a man managing a meeting and more like a man hearing footsteps behind a locked door. That's routine, he said, but his voice came out too dry. Supervisors restart lines all the time. Paul Brenner did not answer right away. He scrolled once, then twice, the tablet light reflecting off his glasses. Not after a lockout tag. The words settled over the table like dust. Daniel kept one hand on the back of Ava's chair and the other flat on the polished wood, near the tiny screw, near the cream insurance envelope, near the version of page 17 that had been scrubbed clean. He could feel anger rising in him, hot and old, but he did not feed it. Anger could make a man loud, could not make evidence stronger. Evelyn Mercer stood now. The legs of her chair made a soft scrape against the floor, and even Martin Kessler stopped pretending to arrange his papers. Pull the badge scan, she said. Paul hesitated, glancing toward Victor. Evelyn's eyes did not move. Now, the factory's administrative system opened slowly, as if reluctant to betray anyone important. A list of door swipes appeared. Daniel Whitaker, Maintenance Corridor, 1:58 a.m. Daniel Whitaker. Line 4 panel, 2:04 a.m. Carl Rourke. Maintenance Corridor, 2:12 a.m. Carl Rourke. Breaker rail access, 2:14 a.m. Then the camera file beside that window showed a dead gray strip from 2:10 to 2:19. 9 minutes of missing sight, exactly where the truth should have been. Ava leaned closer to Daniel's side. Daddy? She whispered. Why is the picture gone? Daniel looked down at her, softened his face and said, Sometimes machines stop seeing. That's why people have to tell the truth. Martin exhaled through his nose. This is becoming speculative. No, Evelyn said, and her voice was still calm, but it no longer belonged to a woman merely observing. It is becoming sequential. Victor stepped forward, palms open, the mask of concern returning to his face. Evelyn, with respect, this is exactly the kind of internal confusion that harms morale. Let me handle this with operations before it becomes a public misunderstanding. Daniel noticed the word handle. Not solve. Not investigate. Handle. Teresa Miles from the union arrived then, called by Evelyn's assistant, her gray coat still damp from the morning rain. She carried a thin folder pressed to her chest and looked first at Daniel, then at the contract, then at Ava under the navy jacket. I was told there was a safety pause, she said. There is, Evelyn replied, and possibly more. Teresa opened the folder. Inside were two older complaints, both from line 4, both mentioning a high-pitched whine before pressure fluctuation. One worker had been moved to shipping after filing his note. Another had withdrawn his statement after a meeting with Carl. The paper smelled faintly of toner and old fear. Daniel stared at the names. He knew them. Men with kids. Men with mortgages. Men who laughed too loudly in break rooms because quiet made them think about bills. He could have used that moment to point at Carl, to make the room feel what he had felt. Instead, he looked at Teresa. Protect Mason and the other two from last night before anyone asks them questions. Evelyn looked at him then. Fully. Not as a problem. Not as a liability. As a man still thinking about people who were not in the room. Paul's tablet chimed again. A vendor invoice had surfaced under an emergency procurement folder. North Ridge Components? Heat seal gasket lot. Discounted. Incomplete certification. The approval trail did not end with Carl. Climbed higher toward operations. Victor's hand moved to his phone, then stopped when Evelyn saw it. Martin said softly, "We should continue this privately," but just then his own phone lit on the table with a message preview he had failed to hide. Destroy the red tag. No one spoke. The screw, the missing camera, the deleted log, the star-marked page 17, and the broken piece of red plastic now seemed to breathe together in the center of the room. Evelyn closed the folder with one hand and looked through the glass wall toward the factory floor. "No," she said. "This does not stay behind a closed door." Evelyn Mercer did not move the confrontation to the factory floor for drama. She moved it there because line 4 was where the lie had started, and because the men and women who worked under its noise deserved to hear the silence around it. The main floor of Whitestone Components had been cleared in a wide half-circle around the shutdown line. Yellow safety tape hung between steel posts. The belts were still. The pressure panel glowed dull green, waiting. Workers stood in clusters with lunch pails, gloves, hairnets, tired eyes, and the uneasy posture of people who had learned that truth at work could cost rent money. Daniel walked in last, not like a man cleared of anything. Not yet. His shoulders were heavy from the night shift. His work boots left faint gray marks on the polished concrete, and Ava stayed close to Teresa Miles. One small hand wrapped in the union representative's coat sleeve. Carl Rourke stood near the breaker rail with his radio clipped high, looking angry in the careful way of a man trying to appear offended instead of afraid. Martin Kessler carried the HR folder against his chest. Victor Haynes stepped forward before Evelyn could speak, his face arranged into concern. "Everyone, I want to be very clear. This company values safety. What happened last night was unfortunate, but internal documents can be confusing, especially when copies leave controlled channels." A few workers murmured. It almost worked. Victor's voice was steady, expensive, trained by years of boardrooms where people mistook calm for truth. He gestured toward Daniel without pointing. "Mr. Whitaker is under stress. He has a child. He made a judgment call. We are trying to resolve this without hurting his family or this plant." Daniel looked down once, not in shame, but to make sure Ava was still behind Teresa and away from every adult using kindness like rope. Evelyn waited until the murmurs thinned. Then she touched the remote. Two versions of page 17 appeared on the large safety screen above line 4. On the left, the crooked phone photo from Daniel's kitchen table. Purple star in the corner, brown crescent of coffee, technical appendix mentioning a substandard heat seal gasket. On the right, the HR copy. Clean, bright, no star, no coffee, no appendix, only Daniel's acceptance of fault. Ava did not step forward. She only lifted one finger from Teresa's sleeve and pointed at the screen. "That's mine," she said softly. It was not loud, but the nearest workers heard her, and something tender passed through the room. Martin immediately raised a hand. A child's mark does not establish document integrity. Daniel did not turn on him. He only said, "No, but a missing truth does." Evelyn changed the screen. Next came the cached service log. Daniel Whitaker, 2:05 a.m., pressure irregularity logged. Then the lockout record. Then the photo of the red tag, broken and pulled from the safety trash. Its corner snapped, Daniel's blocky handwriting still visible. Carl gave a short laugh. Anybody could have written that after the fact. For a second, the room leaned his way. It was possible. It sounded reasonable enough. Then Teresa opened a sealed evidence bag and held up the broken red plastic beneath the overhead work light. This was logged by safety disposal before any of us left HR, she said. Evelyn clicked again. Martin's phone message appeared on the screen. Destroy the red tag. The workers did not gasp. They went quieter than that. Carl's mouth opened, but Victor stepped in smoothly. Counsel was preserving confidentiality during a volatile internal review. Daniel finally looked at the workers, not at Victor. This is not about making a man look bad, he said. It is about making sure the next man on this line goes home. Evelyn nodded once to Paul Brenner. The safety engineer connected his tablet to the screen with trembling fingers and pulled up the breaker rail access map. Badge scan appeared line by line. Daniel at 2:04, Carl at 2:14. Carl's face lost color. Then, just beneath his entry, a higher access code loaded slowly onto the screen, letter by letter, while Victor's hand went still at his side. 01. VHOPS 01 appeared beneath Carl's badge scan, and the big safety screen seemed to hold its breath. For 1 second, nobody moved. Not the workers under the yellow tape, not Teresa Miles with Ava tucked beside her, not Martin Kessler with his phone still face up on the rolling cart, not Victor Haynes standing below the glow of his own access code. The projector fan clicked softly. Somewhere behind line 4, a cooling pipe knocked once in the wall. Evelyn Mercer stepped closer to the screen, her silver watch catching the factory light, and said, "Paul, open the approval trail." Victor's voice came out low. "Evelyn, this is privileged operations data." "Not anymore." Paul touched the tablet. The screen shifted from badge scans to procurement records, each line appearing with the dull finality of a door locking. North Ridge Components, heat seal gasket lot, discounted emergency purchase, incomplete certification, override approved by VHOPS 01. The workers did not erupt. They stared. Men and women who knew the sound of bad bearings and late paychecks watched a file name become heavier than any speech. Victor swallowed, then smoothed his tie with 2 fingers. Emergency substitutions are permitted under production continuity rules. Evelyn did not look at him. Only with safety certification. She clicked once more. A red warning box opened beside the invoice. Certification pending, not cleared for high heat pressure housing. Carl turned his face toward the floor. Martin closed his phone slowly, but the message had already been captured and saved. Destroy the red tag. Daniel stood near Teresa, one hand resting on Ava's shoulder, and felt the anger of the whole room gather around him like weather. It would have been easy to let it strike. Easy to let the workers shout Victor down. Easy to become the man everyone finally pitied or applauded. But Daniel looked at line 4 instead. The silent machine. The breaker rail. The place where 3 workers had almost stepped because a company had treated people like numbers that could be moved around after the fact. "There's more," Evelyn said. She opened the document metadata. On the left side of the screen appeared the kitchen table copy, the one from Mrs. Henderson's old phone. Crooked and warm, purple star in the bottom corner, coffee crescent by the staple shadow, technical appendix still attached. On the right appeared the HR version, clean and cold. The metadata loaded beneath it. Printed 6:04 a.m., legal department printer, template name employee fault final clean. A sound moved through the crowd, not a gasp exactly, but a shared intake of breath, as if the whole factory had discovered it had been breathing someone else's lie. Martin's hand slipped on the edge of the HR folder, and several pages slid to the concrete floor. He bent to gather them, then stopped, because no one was looking at the papers anymore. They were looking at him. Victor tried once more. The company needed containment. The word left his mouth and died there. Containment. Not truth. Not safety. Not Daniel. Not Mason. Not Ava's insurance. Evelyn turned from the screen, and her voice carried cleanly across the factory floor. Victor Haynes, your operational access is suspended immediately pending independent audit and referral to state workplace safety authorities. Carl Rourke, you are relieved of supervisory duties. Mr. Kessler, surrender your company device and the HR folder to compliance. The factory went silent then, truly silent, in a way Daniel had never heard while standing near a production line. No motors, no belts, no laughter. Just the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and Ava's small breath as she leaned against him. She looked up and whispered, "Daddy, did the page tell the truth?" Daniel looked at the purple star on the screen, then at the workers waiting for him to become something larger than himself. He shook his head gently. "No, sweetheart," he said. "People did. The page just helped them be brave." Evelyn stepped toward him, no longer distant, no longer merely observing, and said quietly enough that only those nearest heard, "Mr. Whitaker, you have been wronged. The company will make this right." Daniel did not answer right away. He looked past her to line 4, to Mason's pale face in the second row, to the workers whose names had been buried in old complaints, and to Ava holding the sleeve of his jacket like it was the safest thing in the building. The truth had finally given him power, but the question now was what kind of man he would be with it. The crowd did not break into applause after Evelyn's order. It loosened slowly, like a breath held too long. Workers stepped back from the yellow tape in silence, some looking at Daniel, some looking at line 4, some looking at the floor as if remembering every time they had swallowed a warning because rent was due Friday. Victor Haynes was escorted toward the administrative corridor without handcuffs, without shouting, without the drama men like him could later call persecution. Carl Rourke surrendered his radio to compliance with fingers that would not quite close. Martin Kessler placed the HR folder and his company phone into a gray evidence bag, and the little sound of the zipper sealing shut seemed louder than any confession. Daniel watched it all with Ava pressed against his side, her cheek against the sleeve of his navy jacket. He did not smile. A man could be proven right and still feel the weight of how close the lie had come to his child. 1 week later, the factory looked different in small ways before it looked different in official ones. Line 4 stayed dark behind new safety barriers. The hum of production no longer swallowed every voice. Notices appeared near the time clocks. Independent audit underway, anti-retaliation protection active, safety reporting line open to union review. Daniel's personnel file was corrected. His missed pay was restored. Ava's insurance coverage was confirmed in writing, with Evelyn Mercer's signature at the bottom and Teresa Miles's initials beside it. But the paper Daniel held longest was not the reimbursement notice. It was the scanned copy of page 17, the real one, preserved now in the audit file with Ava's purple star in the corner and the coffee crescent beside the staple shadow. What had looked like a child's doodle had become the first place truth refused to disappear. Evelyn met Daniel in the quiet break room after the morning shift change. The vending machine buzzed. Rain tapped against the narrow window. On the table between them sat his metal lunchbox, dented on one side, the same lunchbox he had set down before locking out the line. Evelyn did not offer him a speech or a polished corporate apology meant for cameras. She placed a folder in front of him and said, "You have every right to pursue a personal claim." Daniel looked at the folder, then through the glass toward the workers moving past the safety board. Mason was there, alive, holding a hard hat against his chest like he still did not know what to do with being spared. "I want something else," Daniel said. Evelyn waited. A worker safety protection fund. Independent reporting. Union oversight. No supervisor can bury a lockout again. And the old complaints get reopened, not archived. Evelyn studied him with the same careful eyes that had once doubted him. This time there was no suspicion in them, only respect, quiet and earned. "That helps everyone more than it helps you," she said. Daniel closed the folder gently. "That's the point." Later, when the new policy was signed on the factory floor, no one asked Ava to stand in front. No one made her a symbol too heavy for a child to carry. She stood beside Teresa, safe among adults who had finally learned to listen, holding a purple star sticker she had peeled from her notebook. When Daniel walked over, she pressed it onto the lid of his lunchbox, smoothing the corners carefully with both thumbs. "So you remember," she said. Daniel knelt to her height, the concrete cold beneath one knee, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. You didn't have to save me, Peanut. Ava looked at page 17 clipped inside the audit binder, then back at him. I just remembered what was true. His eyes shone then, but he did not look away in shame. He hugged her with one arm, the old navy jacket folding around them both like shelter. Across the floor, workers paused without being told. No cheating. No speeches. Just hard hats lowered a little, eyes softening, bodies making room as Daniel stood and walked past line 4. The machine was silent now, not because truth had been buried, but because this time someone had listened before it was too late. And in that quiet, beneath fluorescent light and the smell of oil and rain, Daniel Whitaker learned that dignity does not need to raise its voice. It only needs one honest page, one brave child, and one tired man who refuses to sign away the truth.